To order at 7:05. I apologize for the delay. Today is December 13th, and again, this is the regular business meeting of the Milford Board of Education. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance Thank you. Ms. Griffin, can we have a roll call, please?
Adam DeYoung.
Here.
Megan Doyle.
Ms. Doyle will be late.
Andrew Fowler.
Here.
Rita Hennessy.
Ms. Hennessy is not feeling well. She won't be here. She's excused.
Emily McDonough Souza.
Here.
Holly Mulranan. Una Petrowski.
Here.
Betsy Ratner. Cindy Wolf Boynton.
Here.
And Susan Glennon.
Here.
8 board members present.
Thank you. Before we get started, I'm going to read some housekeeping items. In compliance with Governor Lamont's executive order and the Commissioner of Public Health's rules for school buildings, attendees are required to wear well-fitted face masks that fit completely over the nose and mouth while inside the school building, regardless of their vaccination status. This includes during public comment. Spare masks are available for those who need one. Please exercise social distancing while inside the school building. Auditorium seating is set up to provide a 6-foot distance between attendees who are not immediate household members. Restrooms and hand sanitizers are available for meeting attendees. To reach the microphone for public comment, which is right here on your left side of the auditorium, please walk to the back and around the PA desk if you're seated on the far side. We thank you in advance for your cooperation in promoting a safe and healthy environment for this meeting. And I'd also like to once again thank the Jonathan Law staff and our tech folks and administration for working so hard to provide a meeting space for us during the pandemic. We'll go on to student reports. I believe Jonathan Law goes first tonight. Aiden King and Jackson Waters.
Thank you and good evening, board members. As always, I will begin tonight with some law-amazing news. The holiday spirit is on the rise at Law. Our National Society put up our giving tree for donate to those in need. Our school newspaper finished its annual video. It was the night before Lawmas, including cameos from both students and faculty alike. It can be found on their YouTube channel at JLHS Eagle Eye News. We had a PJ Day to collect donations for Connecticut Children's Foundation this past Friday, which turned out to be another successful Law Nation donation day. Both law and form and faculty are working hard to formulate plans for social events such as sophomore ring dance, junior prom, and senior cotillion for this spring. The Drama Club had their first in-person show in 2 years with limited capacity to friends and family members, which turned out to be a major success. In academics, the Science Club is working hard to prepare for their upcoming Science Olympiad competitions, which take place virtually in February and March. Our club members collaborate to apply science and engineering skills to specific tasks in order to compete. In the Business, Computer Science, and Tech Ed department, we have started 2 new clubs. The first is a chapter of the Future Business Leaders of America to help support our students who are interested in pursuing business-related endeavors. The second is a new after-school cooking club that will be working closely with the Bethel Center here in town. Lastly, the computer science classes are hosting a Careers in Computer Science webinar, which will feature members of the local community, including a law graduate from the class of 2017. The webinar will help guide students with what post-high school paths are available to them. And now, with athletics.
In Law sports action, the Powder Puff team faced off in a defensive battle against Foreign, pulling off an exciting 8-6 victory in double overtime. Law football beat Foreign 21-14 in the annual Thanksgiving game. Law soccer's Lex Edwards was named All-New England, becoming the 7th athlete in school history to do so. Winter sports have begun and teams have already started to prepare for the upcoming season. Now into school counseling, college, and career. December 1st marked another successful annual junior night program. Over 50 grade 11 families were welcomed into the building to meet with their school counselors and kickstart the post-high school planning process. Last week, Foreign and Law collaborated on a series of evening information sessions for the virtual college and career exploration program. Families registered to attend 30-minute presentations from Gateway Community College, Fire Technology, Radiology, and Automotive Technology programs, Housatonic Community College, Advanced Manufacturing programs, and many other programs. Finally, seniors had the opportunity to participate in on-the-spot admissions days on December 8th and 10th. Approximately 15 students had virtual meetings with college admissions representatives from SCSU, CCSU, University of New Haven, University of Bridgeport, and Quinnipiac University, and they received their acceptances on the spot. They were great days to celebrate student success. We'd like to wish the board happy holidays, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Next we have Foreign, David Gaetano and Arzu Gezag.
Hello everyone, my name is Arzu Gazog and I'm here today again with David Gaetano to represent Foreign High School. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak in front of you all tonight. We're so excited to share all that's been happening in our school recently with you. First, we'll discuss some of our athletic successes. As fall sports has concluded in the past couple of weeks, we've been able to transition into the winter sports season. Many of our fall athletes were recognized for their outstanding athletic performance this past season. To name a few, Ava Steigbegel from volleyball was named to the All-SEC second team. Colleen Ardolino and Bassett Idris were named to the All-State soccer team. Zoe Fallon and Courtney Mustanti from soccer were named to the All-SEC second team. Ellen Penn from swimming was recognized to the All-State team for the 100 backstroke in swimming. And Jason Cruz, Joe Gaetano, Justin Daniels, and AJ Edmond were named to the All-SEC team for football. Also, our head football coach, Coach Drew, was awarded the New Haven Football Officials Association Coach of the Year Award for his clean play and sportsmanship this past season. Our boys and girls basketball teams look forward to playing their first games of the season this week after their scrimmages last week, and our boys and girls hockey teams look forward to this as well. In terms of academics, many unique learning experiences have been happening inside of our classrooms. In photography classes, students explored long exposures and alternate lighting by experimenting with light painting, working to create one-of-a-kind images using flashlights. In the realm of English, Olivia Salai was named our Journalism Reporter of the Week last week for her dedication to the Main Street Mirror and helping to release the most recent December issue of the newspaper. History students in all classes have recently taken time to reflect on the events of Pearl Harbor 80 years ago, remembering all of those who had lost their lives on this tragic day in history. A couple of weeks ago, also in history, AP Psychology students were able to strengthen their knowledge of operant conditioning by inviting the K-9 unit from the Milford Police Department to come and demonstrate how their dogs are trained, which is a very interesting and interactive learning experience. Another exciting academic success recently had been the reopening of our school store. Business students have finally been able to reopen the store after a 2-year period of inactivity and now welcome students during periods 3 and 6 during the school day. Thank you, and I'd like to hand off the discussion to David.
Thank you, Arzu, and thank you again, board members, for hosting us this evening. I'd like to take my time to talk a little bit about the highlights from Foreign over the past month. One thing Foreign has especially been focusing on this month during the holiday season is charity work in the community. With drives supporting Thanksgiving food donations, Home for the Brave, Quilts of Honor, Toys for Tots, and the American Red Cross, there's no shortage of ways our students can give back to the community. One heartwarming example of this is our Natural Helpers Drive for Adopt a Family, where they brought in toys, clothes, and gift cards for local families in need. On top of all of this, our Foreign community has been coming together over the past few weeks to bolster school spirit before break. We started off this season with a successful pep rally before Thanksgiving and are currently working to start our Winter Spirit Week on Thursday. Our teachers and staff have also been getting into the holiday spirit with our holidays competition over the past 2 weeks. During common time, students and teachers work together to help decorate our halls and create a welcoming holiday environment. Foreign clubs have been especially active during the past month, many of them volunteering their time for local charities and nonprofits. One such club is Foreign's new Giving Table Club, where students lend their time to cook and prepare meals for different in-need groups of people in Milford, namely veterans and firefighters. Likewise, our Key Club has been very active in the community recently with countless hours of Salvation Bell ringing our students have done. All the funds gathered from these collections will go to Milford, helping Milford charities ensure local families get heat and are taken care of during the holiday season. Our Key Club officers have also attended Kiwanis meetings over the past month to help our school community reach out into Milford as a whole. And Foreign's Interact Club has spent the past few weeks raking leaves at senior citizens' homes across Milford. This holiday season, it is Foreign's goal to help all of Milford have a healthy, safe, and secure winter break. Once again, Arzu and I would like to thank you, members of the board, for allowing us to share the amazing things our students are doing in the community. We really appreciate this time to speak on our school's behalf and are looking forward to another successful meeting next month. Thank you.
Thank you, student reps. We appreciate having you here each month as well. As usual, you're free to go off and get on with your evening, but we'd like to wish you a happy holiday and hope you have a great break at the end of the month. All right, the next item on the agenda is public comment. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak to the board tonight for public comment? Okay, the microphone is over here, and I'm just going to read the statement while you are making your way over there. This is the microphone, sir. The microphone is over here for public comment. Yep, I'm sorry. Speakers may offer objective comments about school operations and programs. The board encourages speakers not to express personal complaints or defamatory comments about the Milford Board of Education personnel or any person associated with Milford Public Schools. Security issues and matters relating to negotiations and grievances will not be permitted. Consistent with the principles of the Federal Education Right to Privacy Act, discussion of students is prohibited absent parental waiver. Public comment does not allow for two-way conversation between speakers and the board, but we welcome and appreciate your comments and opinions, and all will be taken into consideration. Please note our meetings are televised and live streamed on YouTube. We ask that you state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Comments should be addressed to the board and must pertain to the business of the board. We ask that you speak up and directly into the microphone. You're welcome to position if you need to. Mr. Fowler is our timekeeper. He will indicate when 15 seconds remain, then time at 3 minutes when we ask that you leave the microphone so the next person can speak. Thank you so much, and the floor is yours, sir.
Okay. My name is Ed Van Show. I live on New Haven Avenue. I haven't been here in some time. I have 3 children that have been through the school system. My youngest graduating in 2020. I have friends that have expressed concerns about some of the programs, the curriculum items that are being implemented into school today, and the mandates that have been set by the school, but I'm not even going to go there. There's plenty of folks, and you guys have your hands full with that, so I'm not going to waste my time talking about that. But I do have a larger concern, and even though my children are out, I feel empathy towards parents, young parents of school children that are entering the school system. I don't know how many of you look at the TV, listen to the news, look at statistics, but our kids are not in a good place. Teen suicides are up, bullying is up, juvenile crime is up, school violence is up. There's something happening here with our kids. I don't have an answer for it, but I do know there has to be some focus on it. For me, my kids are grown, so I really don't have any stake in the game with this, but I do really think, for the sake of our kids, because that's why all of you decided to join the Board of Ed, to try to help establish programs, to help our children learn through new programs and events and such. I think we really need to step back and really look at what's happening, because we've asked our kids to act like adults for the last 5 years, and with the last 2 years have been really, really hard on them. It really has been socially, emotionally. Kids are getting quiet. They're being reclusive. It's not a good thing. And I think we need to stop looking at ourselves and looking at more, because even as parents, we kind of speak more for ourselves than we do for our kids. And the poor kids, they're out there, they don't have a voice. But I see the statistics that are there, and it's really concerning. So I'm basically here to appeal to the board to recognize this, understanding that, yes, there are some great things, programs, progressive programs, mandates that are out there, but in the middle are our kids, and we have to find a balance. So again, that's all I wanted to kind of bring to your attention, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Cho. It's good to see you. I hope you'll be able to stay for instructional highlight because it's on this topic.
Oh, my dinner's getting cold.
All right, so make sure you watch the recording then. Anybody else who would like to address the board this evening? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on with our agenda. On the agenda, next item on the agenda is the chair's report. First off, we will be removing the November 22nd special meeting minutes from the consent agenda for a correction, and that will be placed as item B under new business. Second, I just want to remind the board that there is no committee of the whole meeting this month. January begins our budget work with the superintendent's presentation at the business meeting on the 10th. Question and answer and discussion will follow at the workshops on the 12th, the 13th, the 19th, with a hold on January 20th. We anticipate that we'll vote on the budget on the 19th. If we should have any inclement weather, we did discuss during our leadership meeting the potential to revert to a virtual meeting rather than canceling any of the meetings. I discussed the option with the state, and they agreed that it was something that we could do, so we'll follow a certain format, so more to come on that. And lastly, I just want to wish everybody happy holidays and a nice new year moving into 2022. I know it's been another tough year, but hopefully we're getting to the back end of this pandemic, and we'll be, with each passing month, we'll be able to get a little bit back to normal. So I hope everybody has a relaxing holiday. Do we have any liaison reports from anybody this evening? Ms. Petrosky?
I went to the Board of Aldermen meeting this past Monday, and just wanted to let you know that the new building resiliency program is in place for the microgrid, and Harborside is part of that microgrid, in addition to Parsons and a few other buildings downtown.
Thank you, Ms. Petrosky. Any other? Mr. Fowler.
Thank you, Ms. Glennon. Just a few updates from the Permanent School Facilities Building Committee. First, Ms. Wolf-Boynton and myself attended the committee meeting last Thursday. We voted to finally declare complete Phase 2 projects at Harborside and Meadowside, and we were alerted to some process issues related to the state. I think Mr. Riccitelli could maybe tell us more about that in the coming future, but it's holding up parts of Phase 4 of the projects, which concern Live Oaks and Calf Pen Meadow. And other than that, we had a brief update from Tecton Architects about the timeline for the Pumpkin Delight project. So the next few phases are coming up to the final meetings with the state and city officials, as well as presenting the final design for the project to our committee in late January. So if you have any questions, feel free to follow up with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. Any other board members have a liaison report? I did the PTA council meeting. Gave them a primer on the capital improvement plan process that we follow. Seeing no other reports, we will move on to new business. Ms. Petrosky, do you have a motion for item A under new business?
I do. I make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves the amended working agreement between the Connecticut Association of Labor Unions, CALU number 3, Milford Association of Education Secretaries, MAES, and the Milford Board of Education for July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2023.
Is there a second?
I second.
Mr. Fowler seconds. Do we have any discussion from board members? Okay, seeing none. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, item B under new business. For the November 22nd, 2021 special meeting that was the orientation, we need to correct the attendees to remove Mr. Pulowski's name, Ms. Griffin, and replace that with Ms. Mulrenan's name, because she was in attendance, and Mr. Pulowski's term had ended. That was just an oversight. Ms. Petrosky, can we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
Yes, I make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves the November 22nd, 2021 Board Orientation Minutes as corrected.
Is there a second?
I second.
Mr. Fowler has seconded. Do we have any discussion from board members? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, board members. We move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Ms. Glennon. Thank you, board members. I'm grateful that this evening, it seems like someone in our public comment has already teed up the evening for us. I would agree that it is a pressing issue in our schools across the nation. And so our concern clearly is Milford and our students in our 14 schools. So I am pleased to provide you, through Dr. Fedigan and her team this evening, a little bit of a perspective on social-emotional learning and what that looks like in our schools, factually from a perspective of curriculum and instruction, and a little bit about how we're being responsive to our most current needs in classrooms, particularly about what we're seeing across the nation. And of course, Milford is not immune to that. Our students are experiencing what we're seeing throughout our country. So we're going to give you a little bit of overview and provide some opportunity for discussion and Q&A with you. So I'll turn things over to Dr. Fedigan.
Thank you, Dr. Kutaya. Good evening, members of the board. As Dr. Kutaya mentioned in her opening remarks, we as a school system have been historically committed to leveraging social-emotional learning, best practices to support all learners in our learning community, students and adults alike. And now more than ever, this work is really critically important. As you know, we've been focusing on building really strong relationships, fostering relationships in our learning communities. And so you're going to hear a little bit more tonight about our proactive efforts to really foster a sense of belonging in our schools for all learners. So Dr. Gillespie, our instructional supervisor of student development and wellness for grades 6 through 12, and Mr. Sean Smith are going to narrate a presentation for you tonight to tell you where we've been and also where we're headed to be really proactive and responsive for our learners in Milford Public Schools. So at this point, I'll invite them to come up and share some of our newest work in this area.
Thank you, Dr. Fedigan. Third time's a charm. So good evening, board members. Thank you for having us here tonight. I want to wish you all a happy holidays. I know most of you, but not all of you. My name is Sean Smith. I'm the supervisor of student development and wellness for pre-K through 5. And I'm here with my partner, Dr. Christiane Gillespie, who's a superintendent, not superintendent, I just promoted you. The supervisor of student development and wellness for grades 6 through 12. So we're very pleased to be here tonight, and we're going to go through some information on social-emotional learning. And our goals tonight are to teach you what social-emotional learning is and why it's important, to give you a brief history of the social-emotional learning in Milford, and to paint for you a picture of what social-emotional looks like in our classrooms today. One of the many benefits of social-emotional learning is that it fosters a sense of belonging in our school community, which we think is vital for a successful school experience and vital for students' well-being. To the gentleman's comments who started off tonight, this is what we do to help our students be successful in school. So what is social-emotional learning? SEL, we call it, involves processes to which children and even adults understand and manage their emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. These are areas of growth for kids and adults as well. I joke with our new teachers that I'm not only the supervisor of SEL, but I'm also a client, because I could use these strategies myself on a regular basis. SEL, as it is currently known, when I grew up, I had character education, and many of you probably did as well. And character education's been part of our schools forever. Character education, how to be a good citizen. But the current version of SEL actually started not far from here, but in New Haven at Yale University. It's been around for a while. So 1968, Dr. James Comer started SEL through a program where he and a bunch of his colleagues decided to not focus just on academics, but to teach the whole child. And they saw tremendous success to that approach. And the researchers and the educators at the time noticed that, and over the next couple of decades, developed social-emotional learning. And it was the early 90s when the term was actually coined and used in its current state. We have a short video clip that describes social-emotional learning and its benefits that I want to show you. I feel like it's a nice, short, comprehensive way for you guys to get a good idea of social-emotional learning.
have improved attitudes and behaviors, and act in delinquent or disruptive ways less often. In the United States, students with strong social-emotional competence are twice as likely to earn a college degree and nearly 50% more likely to graduate from high school and have a full-time job by age 25. Just as important, students who are socially and emotionally competent have more friends. This means they're more likely to feel connected to school and do well, and less likely to be left out or bullied. Simply put, by participating in social-emotional learning, students learn the skills to succeed in every facet of school and the rest of their lives.
So that was a big picture, very short big picture of social-emotional learning. And our goal for our presentation is to zoom in a little bit throughout the presentation so that you get to know it a little bit better. This slide here talks about why SEL is so important. This was published in 2016 in EdUtopia, and it talks about some of the benefits of SEL. And similar to the video, things such as a positive attitude towards oneself, more positive social behaviors, reduced conduct problems and risk-taking, decreased emotional distress, improved test scores, grades, and attendance. So that was another study. The benefits of SEL have been very well researched, as shown in the video as well as on this slide.
Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to speak to all of you. I'm Christy Angeleski, and I am very privileged to be the new supervisor for student development for 612. And I know many of you from my prior role as assistant principal at Foreign for 10 years. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our foundation here in Milford Public Schools. So the concept of social emotional learning and the importance of belonging is really woven through all of our foundational documents and guiding premises. So if we look into the relationships framework, we look at our model for HQI, we look at the vision of the learner, it is all based upon this concept of relationships and our students finding themselves. It's one thing for us to take a look at articles and find scholarly definitions, as well as look at formal definitions of what social emotional learning is. But Mr. Smith and I we took a different approach as we thought of what is the best way to share social emotional learning in Milford Public Schools. And that is, of course, through talking to our students. So I took a journey, and we went to many of our buildings throughout Milford Public Schools in the past several weeks and prepared a compilation of student voices and student quotes for what they told us social emotional learning is according to them.
To me, it's just like learning to like form connections with the students around us and just learning to really build the relationships with people who we might not know. And even though we don't know them, we don't have to be best friends, but it's nice to just be able to like smile and wave at them and know that like if we needed them, they would have our backs.
So I think that like social emotional learning within like the Wingman program, it's a way to like get students who are or normally aren't very social to be social and be able to share their emotions and learn from their peers and learn more about themselves by talking with others and grow connections with other students so it doesn't feel like you're alone.
Social emotional learning is teaching kids all about how to communicate with others, about showing and expressing their emotions instead of keeping it inside and not doing anything with it. When we do social emotional learning, it really helps them get together with others and express themselves.
I think it's really important because it's something that you're going to be using your whole life, something that learning at a young age is so important because, again, it's something you're always going to be having to use.
Social emotional learning is more so like just kind of connecting what we learn like subject-wise in school to how we feel.
I have to tell you that it was absolutely the highlight of my entire year so far to talk with these students and hear their perspective, and also just to see how eloquently they were able to describe the practices of social emotional learning in their classrooms. Especially the young man who was very serious when he was telling me that we often have conflicts if we're feeling that we don't have a friend. So much of what these students said really, for me, brought to life our pre-K-12 vertical framework that I know was shared with all of you, as well as our curriculum, which we're going to tell you some more about. To give you a little more background, social emotional learning is important for every student, but it's especially important for any of our children who have experienced trauma through what we call adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs. And ACEs are things that reflect abuse, neglect, or other types of household dysfunction, basically challenges that our young people experience that can be barriers possibly to their success. There was a really important study that was done in 1994 that coined that phrase, adverse childhood experiences. And it was a study that was a partnership between the Center for Disease Control as well as through Kaiser Permanente. And they looked at data to look at the risk factors and the success outcomes for students as well as the impacts on overall health. This graphic shows you some of the different types of ACEs that there are. As I said, they can fall under the category of abuse, neglect, household dysfunction. And what occurred in the study was each person was assigned 1 point for each adverse experience that they could be attributed to them. There was a direct correlation that they found throughout their study. The higher the ACE score, the worse the potential health outcomes were later in life. If we take a look at this example, this little boy's score is a 4, which means that if this child doesn't receive intervention, he's 4.7 times as likely to use drugs and 7.4 times as likely to be an alcoholic when he grows up. The outcomes for students and young people in general are impacted by ACEs can be incredibly extreme. This next slide shows us that on average, people with 6 or more ACEs died nearly 20 years earlier with no ACEs. And that being incredibly significant, we know that childhood traumatic experiences or adverse childhood experiences have a tremendous impact on students, not only in their health, but also in their academic outcomes.
Thanks, Dr. Gillespie. So ACEs have a significant impact on the health of adults as they get older, but they also have a significant impact on children. ACEs and the trauma that they experience from those adverse childhood experiences actually affect the developing brain. There is a physiological effect to ACEs. So scientists discovered that high ACEs actually affect the prefrontal cortex in a child's developing brain, which is responsible for impulse control and executive functioning, which are 2 key components of learning. Doctors can actually see the impact of ACEs on MRIs. So these children's brains actually look different. If they're going through this trauma that we're talking about from one of those factors, and those are very specific factors that they studied, then you can actually see the impact on a child's brain. Those of you with young children, you may go to your pediatrician and they might ask you a series of questions, and you're wondering, why are they asking me all these questions? Those questions are about ACEs because the medical community sees that these have a significant impact on the health of kids. So aside from the typical stress that we see, children today are also dealing with the stress of the pandemic. Pediatricians are calling the current mental health crisis among kids a national emergency. And some of the statistics here would show you why. So just for example, I pulled out 2 statistics, and there's many of them, but the emergency department visits for mental health emergencies rose 24% for children between the ages of 5 and 11, and 31% for those 12 to 17, compared with 2019. So that's directly related to the pandemic. Even more startling is the stat for teenage girls. So visits to the emergency room for suspected suicide attempts were up 51% for girls ages 12 to 17. That's an incredible number. So those numbers are scary, but we're not helpless and we're not hopeless. We do know ways to have a positive impact on children who are experiencing ACEs and who struggle with mental health issues. And I'm talking about these protective factors. So these protective factors help combat ACEs, and they support our students who are struggling. Some of these we have a very direct impact on as a school system, and some of them we don't have a direct impact, but we can certainly support our families in these factors. The two that we have a direct impact on, one is nurturing and attachment. So listening to and responding to children in a supportive way, discovering and paying attention to their physical and emotional needs, making children feel as if they belong to our community and that they're loved and valued. We have a direct impact on that. And the second was the main reason why we're here tonight is social-emotional learning. We can teach kids social-emotional competence, and that's one of the main protective factors against ACEs. Teaching kids about the ability to self-regulate, problem solve, and find success in a variety of social situations. This slide here emphasizes the relationship between the teacher and the student. There's been many research studies that show that the most powerful influence on a student's success is the relationship between the teacher and the student. As a matter of fact, the relationship between any consistent loving relationship between an adult and a child has a significant effect. It doesn't have to be the teacher. Peer relationships are also extremely important, especially through the teen years. And all of these relationships help students to feel like they belong. And the importance of relationships and having a sense of belonging cannot be overstated in how it relates to student success.
And our awareness in Milford Public Schools about this relationship and this importance really goes back many years at this point. So back in 2015 was when SEL work really began in a concentrated way in Milford. We started with, that was the year we had a K-12 supervisor of student development, and in that role we were able to pull together a district-wide team that created the pre-K-12 SEL vertical framework. In addition, that year we had a number of principals who had attended the Yale Seedlings Institute that prior summer, and they were able to introduce a pilot program at several elementary schools to really bring this framework to life, which was then brought to schools the next year. And that was also the year that as an administrative team, we focused on restorative practices and on social-emotional learning as an adult group to really experience it, understand it, to live it. And then the next year, we as administrators brought that to our school buildings and really rolled that out to the school staff. And that was the next phase of our work, where restorative practices, which embedded in restorative practices is a large component about trauma-informed practices, which are directly in response to student ACEs. That work began. We also made a major revision to the secondary advisory curriculum, introducing the restorative circles. And in addition to that, we expanded our community partnerships to have increased programming that was also linked in our curriculum. We also did an implementation of the pre-K3 SEL curriculum and introduced our elementary anchor tools. And if you ever have the opportunity to talk to any of your youngest learners here in the district, ask them about their anchor tools, because they will tell you amazing details about how you use them, when, why. They might even draw you a mood meter. So it's definitely a great conversation starter if you run into any of our littles around town. We then expanded our journey by looking to going to secondary emotional regulation spaces. We were noticing that our older students sometimes just, quote unquote, needed a place to go. They needed time and space and tools to learn how to regulate in times of high stress. And we began that work in 2019, and we've continued rolling that out slowly, especially in light of the pandemic. Some of the protocols have slowed that work slightly, but we are back up and running in that regard. In response to the pandemic, we took our regulation strategies online. Since we knew our students couldn't access our calming spaces and our emotional regulation zone, we made it available to them virtually. In addition, we switched to a different model of student wellness, we looked for an SDW. That position, student development and wellness, was then split into two, knowing that the work had just grown larger. So we had an elementary position as well as a secondary position. We expanded our curriculum. And then, really in response to the pandemic, we've made major revisions to the advisory curriculum at the middle school and the high school, making sure that, again, we weren't necessarily sticking solely to prescribed lessons, but that the lessons were and continue to be directly responsive to the needs of the community, the needs of our students in real time. So we do hope that in the future we'll be at a more stable point where we can go back to more of the prescribed lessons that would be more standard. But at this point, we meet as an advisory group regularly and plan across schools for what is most needed in that moment for our students. So we're continuing on our path with adding additional elementary anchor tools and expanding those to our middle and high school level as well, and making them grade level appropriate. And the big changes this year was that we've added 11 elementary school counselors, really responding to the needs of our younger learners. Those are the feelings teachers that were mentioned to me on my tour, as well as we have started an SEL Guiding Coalition, which is a combination of membership from all schools across the district, which meets periodically with myself, Mr. Smith, and Mr. Brown. And we have coordinated programming district-wide that is also guiding our work in these areas. We've introduced the Wingman program in our middle schools, which has been incredibly helpful because it's entirely student-led and student-driven. So really making it an opportunity for our students to have emotional supports in their peers, as well as break down any barriers that might have existed, especially when everyone is wearing a mask. So it's been beneficial in many ways. We also added an SDW teacher leader position, and consistently are making curriculum revisions, especially to our pre-K-5 SEL curriculum for this year. So just a little insight into some of the work that we've done over the past 6 years in this area. This is the original graphic that was produced when we began this journey back in 2015. This graphic is commonly referred to by those of us in Milford Public Schools as the pillars. That this was the work that social and emotional learning was responsive to these 4 areas: culture and climate, the competencies, instruction, and curriculum. And we wanted tonight to give you a little peek behind the curtain of our current thinking and our current work and where we are in this process. Because over the past 6 years, we like to think that at this point, our work looks more like this. And this is a draft. We're showing you an in-progress version here. This is probably version 12 or 13 at this point. But what we're trying to capture in this graphic is the true story of what social emotional learning is in Milford Public Schools. It's not simple. There isn't a simple, as you've seen from our students, it encompasses many areas. And this graphic is meant to show the path to student success, that it encompasses many different pieces. It's built on our pre-K SEL vertical framework that goes through 12th grade. It has our competency areas, which are based on the vision of the learner, the relationships framework, and HQI. It starts with explicit SEL instruction with our anchor tools, is expanded with our Wingman and developmental programming such as advisory, and it really lives in our classrooms through embedded SEL, through our instructional practices, and those restorative practices that are so important and really the foundation of our school communities. It's definitely supported through our strong partnerships, and the goal of all of our work is for our students to be successful. And as my first grade friends reminded me, for them also to be happy, and for them to know how to get themselves from a point where they're not feeling secure in something and being able to make a shift and to regulate themselves. Because I know that as parents, that's what we always want for our children, and that's what we want for our students.
So we've talked to you about what SEL is and why it's important and the history of SEL in Milford. So now we want to zoom in further to what does it look like now in our schools. What you have on the screen right now is a summary of the MPS Social Emotional Learning Vertical Framework. And this framework is the guiding document of social emotional learning in Milford. We attached a full copy of it to your board packet so that you could look at it in more detail. On the screen right now is just it's the basic outline. So there's 3 competencies: self-management and self-awareness, social awareness and relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Those are the 3 main competencies of SEL, and underneath those are 11 different learning goals for SEL. This was created in 2015 and 2016, and everything that we've done from that point forward has come off of this document here. So this is the foundation of the work. In your board packet, if you start looking through the framework, you'll see how it's organized. So that's the outline, but then each one of those learning goals is broken down by grade level cluster. So there's learning expectations defined for early elementary, pre-K through 3, late elementary and early middle school, grades 4 through 6, late middle school and high school, 7 through 10, and late high school and early post-secondary, grades 11 through 12. And on the screen right now is just an example of just one of those learning intentions, broken down into one of those goals broken down into learning intentions. So identify and manage one's emotions and my eyes are failing me here.
Behaviors.
Thank you. Somebody needs glasses. Eyes and behaviors, and then broken down into learning intentions for each of those. So what are the main components currently in our SEL program? So we have a pre-K-5 SEL curriculum that was written off of that framework. Within that curriculum, we have anchor tools that Dr. Gillespie alluded to, and I'll show you a few examples of those in a minute. We have school counselors now at all 3 levels. We hired 8 new school counselors at the elementary schools, and we're writing a comprehensive school counseling curriculum with them that we're delivering, and that's going terrific. The 8 people that we hired for elementary schools are just amazing, and the work that they're doing in the schools is really being valued by everybody in the schools. We have morning meeting at the elementary school, and we just added it at the middle school this year. We have an advisory curriculum at the middle school and high school, and the Wingman program at the middle school as well. In addition, we also have, we're working on embedding SEL into our content areas. SEL is not something that should be taught just in morning meeting. You can teach the strategies and the skills in morning meeting, but it should carry on throughout the day in every subject area. We have our school climate surveys that the board is familiar with, and we build subsequent initiatives off of that. We also have school-based climate programs like the Be Kind program and Caught You Being Good programs like the Helpful Hawks. In addition to that, we have Parent University, where we try to support parents in some of those factors that I talked about earlier. We also have One Day for Day One, which is a full day that we put together for teachers to practice self-care before school starts. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we weren't able to do it this year, and that's the quagmire, right? These things that really help you to improve social emotional learning, some of them you can't do because of our restrictions. And we're expanding our mentoring program. We have a successful mentoring program from our high schools into 4 of our elementary schools, and we're building that out to all 8 of our elementary schools. So I'm going to zoom in a bit further, and we mentioned anchor tools a few times. I'm going to show you a few examples of the anchor tools that we have, not all of them, but just a few of them so you get an idea of what they are and how they're used in the schools, and some examples of student work. So hopes and dreams is one of our anchor tools, and this is pretty self-explanatory, but students define what their hopes and dreams are for the school year. Goal setting has proven to be, through research, to really help students grow, and it's a way to give students ownership over their learning. Here's an example. Here's an example of student work, and you probably can't read that from the screen, but it says, in 2nd grade, I hope to become a better mathematician. So that's that student's goal. That's their hope and dream for 2nd grade. Growth mindset is another anchor tool that we use in elementary schools. And we have a lot of discussions about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset would be, I'm not good at subtraction. And a growth mindset would be, I'm not good at subtraction yet. And then it would tell you how I'm going to get good at subtraction. So it really builds grit and determination in our kids. And this is an example of another 2nd grader's growth mindset. And it says, I can't do a lot of work yet, but if I keep on listening and trying, I will be able to. This is another anchor tool called the Identity Collage. So this tool supports self-awareness, social awareness, and relationship skills. It supports students in recognizing and sharing about the various interests they have, the groups that they're part of, so that they can get to know themselves better as well as the other students in their classroom. Eventually, this tool also helps students recognize and understand their own perspectives and the perspectives of others. And this is an example of a student's anchor tool, the Group Identities Collage. So this student was also a 2nd grader, and she talked about her family being from the United States. She has a mom, dad, and a cat. Her hobbies are softball, soccer, exercise, and art. She's a girl with long blonde hair. She's white. Her family traditions include Christmas, being Catholic, God, Easter, and she likes to play outside and walk around the block. So the purpose of this anchor tool is really to help students get to know themselves and get to know each other better. I was working on some of this SEL curriculum, and I had sought some parents' input. And I remember I had one parent on my committee, and she was from Turkey. And she had a 1st and 2nd grader in our schools. And she'd shared with me that the hardest time in her house was actually around Christmas time, because she had a 1st and 2nd grader, and in their Turkish culture, they didn't celebrate Christmas. And not that we teach it in school, but the kids talk about it. A lot of our kids do celebrate Christmas. And she said her kids just felt like they didn't belong, they weren't part of. And she struggled with that. Luckily, she had a very intuitive teacher who saw that, and she invited her into the classroom, and she came in and she showed them some of the traditions that they do for their holiday, which was Ramadan, and showed them some of the dress and some of the foods and shared their customs. And her kids, her 1st and 2nd grader, got to share their stories about Ramadan and what they did. And all of a sudden, they felt like they were part of that classroom. They felt like they belonged. So the power of sharing with kids what your customs and traditions are can be really valuable to these kids. This anchor tool is called the Circle of Support. So one of our goals is for kids to identify the adults in the community who can help them with their challenges. And they identify people in their family, their friends, and community helpers. And this is just an example of one child's circle of support. Community helpers were the vet, and then she goes on and explains all her family and friends. Probably the same girl with the cat. This one is called Best Self. This is a popular anchor tool in our schools. So the purpose of this is for students to envision a positive representation for themselves. Who do they want to be and how do they want to act in certain situations? And they draw a picture and define themselves as that, so that when they encounter situations that are challenging, they can think back to their best self and react how they want to react, instead of reacting impulsively. And here's an example of a student's best self. And if you can read it, it says, during science, I feel excited staying focused. So the student wants to be able to stay focused during science. And those are elementary anchor tools, and I'm going to have Dr. Gillespie share with you some of the middle school and high school work.
So as our students grow older and they've learned these explicit lessons around these emotional regulation tools and picturing themselves as their best selves, goal setting, when they reach the middle school and the high school, it's really a shift to activating all of these in those moments. So these are some pictures, which I realize are small to see, of our middle schools engaging in the Wingman program, which, as I mentioned, is a new program for us this year where it is student-led. And it's not what you would typically imagine where you have older students leading younger students, for example. But Wingman is actually, it's anyone in the school who's interested in being a leader and being a mentor to their peers. So you'll have, in a particular homeroom, you'll have a variety of students who are leading these activities. And all of the students have the autonomy as the group, as the leadership team for that group to actually guide what happens, and they choose the activities themselves. So this is what it can look like for our middle school students, usually incredibly active. The goal there is to have them building community, building relationships, and really reaching out for support when necessary. And if we think to an 18-year-old, seeing the full spectrum, seeing what our first graders, how they want to focus in science, and how our 18-year-olds, our high school students, again, our goal for them is to be successful. We want them to be able to be able to regulate, to be able to set goals and follow through, and to find their niche. This is a picture of just a couple weeks ago. As our student representatives mentioned to you, LAWMIS is well underway, as well as the Holidays at Foreign. This is a recent advisory activity that was taking place where students were designing their door decorating, their wall decorating initiatives. But again, it's about community building as much as it is also about planning for success and building that inherent capability of our students to be self-motivated, to be able to regulate themselves, and to be able to achieve goals and follow through. So as we reach the close of our presentation, in March of 2015, Harvard Centered on the Developing Child released a study that said every child who winds up doing well has had at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive adult. So as Mr. Smith mentioned to you earlier, we know from research and from our experience that the most important factor and the most important predictor of student success is that strong relationship with at least one caring adult. And we were really taken by this video and felt it was that important that we wanted to show it to you tonight. because we've been talking a lot about how SEL fosters relationships. But yet again, we wanted to give you an example where you could see it. So this is, we really understand that words don't always do this justice in terms of definitions and different visuals and things of that nature. So we found this video that we think really demonstrates the importance of the relationships.
If you can't see the faces on the screen, I urge you to get a little closer to the ViewSonic.
Should we move it?
I don't know if we can. But if you can see, fine. But if not, I just urge you to get a little closer because it loses its luster if you can't see the faces.
It's worth the
Can we make it bigger, Blessing?
Yeah, I'll see what I can. Can I turn that?
To this one, I want you to work together on this one.
Can you put it louder, Blessing?
Afterwards, and if you're still having.
All right, guys.
So I'm asking all the teachers to take pictures of things that are important to them. And you are very important to me. You make me want to come to school every day. Take pictures of things that are important to them, and you're important to me. You're one of the reasons that I want to come to school every day. And so,
of things that we love and things that inspire us. So you are one of the reasons that I come to school every day.
I chose you because you mean a lot to me and you're really important to me. So I wanted to take your picture. Okay?
Take a photo of a student that really inspires us to be a better teacher. Okay.
I chose you because you mean an awful lot to me, and I wanted you to know that. So I was wondering if it was okay if I could take your picture. All right? Okay, that's fine. It's because I'm short. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so for this project, I've been asked to take pictures of students that are important to me. And even though you're sassy, and we're both sassy with each other, you're one of the reasons that I love to come to school. So they asked us to pick students, Adasia, that are important to us. And I just wanted to let you know that you're one of the reasons that I love to come to work and that you're really special to me. And I'm proud of everything that you've done. And so I wanted to take your picture.
Okay. So let me explain to you what's going on. Hold on. All right, hold on. Let me
Why does it do my face?
Shh. Ooh, okay, this is good. All right, so let me tell you why I'm doing this. So Mr. Henry, he asked that the teachers, he asked us if we would do a project. And are you here, Maisie?
Yes.
So the project he asked us to do was to pick a student who means a lot to us and who is really important to us and take a picture of them. And the first name who popped to my mind was Zanaya Smith.
Oh my gosh!
So I was wondering if I could take a picture of you.
Sure.
All right, here we go.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay, gotta get ready?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, one. Oh, you're getting higher and higher. Oops, let me. Okay, oh. 1, 2, 3.
What? right, so basically, Mr. Henry is having us take pictures of things that we love and things that inspire us and people who make us want to come to work every day. And seeing you grow and change and try so hard this year, you make me want to come to work. So I'm taking your picture. All right? Okay.
So thank you. Hopefully you're able to see the video. And that concludes our presentation on social emotional learning. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Board members, do we have questions? Ms. Ratner?
Thank you, Ms. Glennon. Oh, my goodness. I have goosebumps and I'm overwhelmed. How beautiful. And thank you both, Mr. Smith and Dr. Gillespie, for sharing that wonderful, detailed way that we now feel SEL is a part of us. I feel when I went back, I mean, I'm out of the teaching realm for quite some time. And at that time, I always felt how important it was teaching the whole child. And I had to sort of hide doing guided imagery. You can't say you're mindfully introducing the lesson with having everybody hands on the belly and focusing and visualizing and getting people relaxed. You've got it out there in the open, it's real, and I'm just so thrilled. And the details for each of the grades is just magnificent. The questions that I have is when the wingmen show some excitement of leadership, that's when, if I understand correctly, the advisors help them come forth with the program that they want to share, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
It's marvelous. Let's see, another question was, it's so robust, I'm like overwhelmed. And, let me see, what's the next question? I think that kind of got answered. I think I'll stop with that and just say thank you. And we are just so blessed in Milford. I hope lots of parents are watching this tonight, or that the word gets out for them to look at it another time, because this tells so much of what every child needs and what they themselves need. This is the essence of being able to learn. If you can't get to the social, emotional aspects of a child, of a person, teachers, parents, children, you're going nowhere. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Wolf-Boynton?
Excuse me. So first off, thank you for that amazing and very powerful presentation. I think that all of us can benefit from what SEL teaches, right? That idea of being resilient. No matter what life throws at us, and life throws at us so many different things at so many different ages. I'm wondering, though, if you could comment a little about ACEs, and what, do you have any idea of the percentage of Milford Public School students who are facing ACEs issues?
I think I can speak a little bit to that. While we don't have any official record keeping or data around our students and their potential ACEs, ACE scores, I can say that from my experience that it is a large number of our students, because those ACEs really can come from so many different areas. And especially now, it's been a focus for us at the secondary level and across the district in terms of trauma-informed practices, because that's what's required when we have any type of household dysfunction, right? So given many of the circumstances of the pandemic have put the majority of our students at a disadvantage here, where if there's job uncertainty, if there's food uncertainty, if there's an illness in the household, if there's all of those contribute to a potential ACE score for a child. So while that's not quantifiable data that we have to share with you, I can say that from my experience, and I'm sure Mr. Smith would agree, that it is many of our students. And at this point, it is becoming the majority of our students who are presenting need, whether it's from an actual realized ACE score or not. They are telling us in no uncertain terms that they need these tools and that they do need the reminders and the guidance through those quick moments that are no longer the exception, but it's what we hope and expect throughout their day.
So I'm curious though, do we do any tracking though of kids who might be at greater risk? I mean, you look at the statistic of this young boy, his score is 4, right? Which makes him so much more likely to face these challenges with drugs and alcohol and whatnot. So I'm just, do we keep track of who might be more at risk? I mean, I know when it comes to food insecurity, that's something that we are getting a better handle on.
And I'll let Mr. Smith add to this, but I can say that we do have many systems in place to identify students who struggle for a variety of reasons. And this would come out as part of that process, whether it's through our student assistance teamwork, whether it's through our counseling referrals. There's a great deal of record keeping and communication within buildings and between levels. And it's a great focus of our work to identify those needs and to be able to put response plans in place. And they look differently depending upon the situation and depending upon the level. And Mr. Smith, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, thank you. So we don't track specifically how many students in Milford have which ACEs, but I can tell you the data from the original study. So in the original study, 67% of the population had at least one ACE, and 12.6% had 4 or more. That's 1 in 8 people. And I think that study would translate to the regular population. We also, in Milford, over the summer, we had a group of our mental health professionals trained in ACEs, how to recognize them, what they were, and how to respond to them. And then we had that same group of mental health professionals do a presentation and train every school building in the district on ACEs and how to recognize them and how to respond to them. And I would say that our teaching staff, without a formal survey of these ACEs, they know their students and they know which students have these adverse experiences by getting to know them, and they take that into consideration when they're planning for their programs.
Can I just add a quick comment to that? I remember in 2015, and at the time I was principal at Penn Meadow Elementary School, and we were one of the schools that was piloting some of these anchor tools in the district at the elementary level. And at the time, we were exploring what is an ACE factor. And one of the things that was astounding was that the group of people, the committee that was working on building that instructional framework for the curriculum, we were thinking about the list of ACE factors, and almost everybody in the room, right, highly educated people, almost everybody had at least one or more than one. And one of the things that I think is super important is that sometimes the ACE factors are really evident in our young people in school and they're manifested in their behaviors, and other times they may not be, which is why it is so important that we have opportunities to ensure that every child is seen, has a sense of belonging, and has these tools as a part of their core learning in school and supported, at school and at home. So this is why we don't want to make assumptions, right, about our students and what may be evident or not in how they behave in school. We want to make sure every child has the supports they need as a part of their core programming in school.
Ms. Wolf-Boynton, to get to your question though, so we are at one of our next steps in the Teaching and Learning Department and the PPS Department, we've been dialoguing a lot about this, is to utilize, for lack of better terms, quote unquote, a screener of sorts that will, of all students, that would allow us to gather information to identify what students may be of a greater risk. And then from there, just like you would a reading assessment, right? Give everybody a reading assessment. From there, then dig deeper with other assessments. So we do have some ideas on the table. We slowed that down a little bit based on COVID and our work over the last month in SEL. So I anticipate that we'll be revisiting that come January and looking at something that we would administer to all kids, so that we can identify those kids who need our intervention and support.
That's fabulous to hear. Everything that we're doing right now, I think, is absolutely fabulous. But so many of these ACEs are potentially invisible, right? That you don't even know that the child is suffering from them. I'm looking at this myself and thinking of all the people that I know who might be able to check off an ACE, an ACE, an ACE, and you would never know unless you knew that person. So it's wonderful to hear that we are taking steps to try to identify those children who might be most at risk. I just have one more question. Could you give an example of how SEL would be embedded into a content area?
Sure. So an elementary example, right? So Best Self, for example, is a tool where the kids identify what, some adjectives that they would use when they're being their best self. And let's say they chose patient, persistent, and kind. And they're in math and they're working on a math problem and it's not an easy one and they're struggling with it. Their teacher can approach them and say, well, let's take out your best self. And are you being your best self right now? And they see the word persistent and they have a conversation about it. And the student recognizes that if they're going to get through this problem, then they need to show some persistence, and then they can work through it that way with the teacher. So it's one elementary example.
I would add to that too, that another way that we can see SEL embedded is through our instructional practices. So, for example, if we think of our middle school or high school classes where maybe it's an ELA class, language arts, right? We know that many students, many of us, many adults have anxiety about speaking in front of large groups or speaking in front of the class or reading aloud. When you embed SEL in your instructional practice, it means that you're being responsive to the needs that you know are in the room at the time. So you're going to capitalize on the strengths of students that you're aware of, and you're going to push others in a way that's safe. Because a large portion of SEL is about having a safe community where there are trusted guidelines and established routines. So for example, when we think about embedded SEL for tonight, I wouldn't have given Mr. Smith the laptop to drive the technology because that would cause unnecessary stress for my partner, whereas that's a stress that I'm happy to take on and can not have a meltdown in front of all of you, correct? But that's how we can embed these things in our daily practice when we're working with our students. That all of our instructional routines, all of our approaches to learning need to be embedded in SEL practices so that we're not creating learning environments that are another layer of adverse experiences for our children. So that's the ongoing work that is really nuanced by department. And we have this year made that that's a very important goal of ours with our instructional supervisor partners, is focusing with our staff around what does this look like in math, what does it look like in science, in all of our different areas.
Other questions? Ms. McDonough-Souza?
Thank you. Thank you both so much for that presentation. As my colleague said, it was very thorough. I learned so much. It was amazing, and I definitely teared up at that last video. Very moving. And broadly speaking, I think that there are a lot of misconceptions and confusion surrounding SEL, as we've heard from some of our past public comment sessions in front of the board. So I do hope that some of the parents and other members of the community have the opportunity to watch his presentation. My question is, I believe that Mr. Smith had said that he sought parents' input with regard to at least I think it was the group identities collage. I don't know if it was that specifically or generally speaking. Yeah, I guess my question is, can you speak more to how you seek parents' input? Is that something that's continuing as the curriculum develops? Was it a one-time thing? And then more generally, how can parents help support these SEL initiatives in the district?
Sure. I wasn't referencing exactly the identities collage, but we made revisions to our curriculum in 2020, and some of that work was around race, equity, and social justice. at that time, as you know, the work around race, equity, and social justice can be complex, and you need a diverse group of people to really work on that. So I had invited a diverse group of parents and educators to the table to say, all right, let's look at the issues that we're seeing out in our country, let's look at the issues that we're seeing in our community, and let's look at the possible curriculum that we can install with children. So at that time, I'd gotten together a group of teachers, administrators, and parents, and I just had a diverse group look at what our plans were so that we had input on that. We like to get as much parent input as possible in developing. A lot of our curriculum is written by the teachers who are teaching it, but where possible and where it makes sense, we do want to get parent input as well.
Mr. DeYoung?
Thank you. Thank you both for the presentation. I just wanted to quickly piggyback off of what Ms. McDonough-Souza said. Starting as early as pre-K, I think mood meters were coming into my house pretty regularly. And honestly, thinking back on it, I think if I wasn't a member of this board, I might have been a little bit confused about it and not really sure what it was, why my kids had red, green, and yellow all over the place. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about parental supports that are coming home with those, and if those are being reviewed on a regular basis, and if so, what's been changed since the introduction of the program?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, like I said, the SEL curriculum in the elementary schools, which the mood meter is part of, is based on anchor tools, and the mood meter is one of our very important anchor tools. But every anchor tool in the elementary schools has a parent tip sheet with it. So if I'm an elementary teacher and I introduce the mood meter, I would send home to you a family guide. Here's what the mood meter is. Here's how you can support it at home. Here are some books that you can get at the library to help your child understand the concept behind the mood meter. So every anchor tool in the elementary curriculum has that guide, and when it's introduced, that should go home to your household. We also have all the guides listed online. So like if you went to the parent website and clicked on the student development and wellness site, clicked on SocialEmotional Learning, every anchor tool has a parent guide, and those are all listed there for parents to access.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. On a slightly different note, appreciate you including the information about mental health currently, because I know it's significantly different than even just 2 years ago. Particularly concerning is the emergence of issues around teenage girls. I wanted to ask you about the, social media. Instagram has been in the news about causing real mental health issues among young girls, and I was wondering what the district is thinking about and doing as it relates to that, and if there's any plan in place to try and address those issues that are, relatively new actually, just within the last 10 years.
There are currently aspects of our health curriculum which address positive relationships, and they do touch on social media and those topics that you are, and we do them in a developmentally appropriate way. So the content for 6th graders is very different than the speakers we bring in for our seniors, for example. We've had a variety of past programming, and we're actually revising that programming for this year in terms of parent university offerings, as well as push-in speakers for students, now that we can have more of a typical experience this year for students, because it continues to change, and we partner very closely with our community partners with the police department, as well as the Milford Prevention Council, and several other partners that we've typically used through Central Connecticut State University to, again, bring these topics forward to our students in a way that is very practical, very real life for them. And we're increasing that programming this year because it is such a need.
Is it something that you've noticed an increase in, mental health issues relating to online, not just Instagram, but online platforms in general?
personally, I can tell you that my time as an assistant principal, it was very consistent. This is unfortunately not something new, and the moment our students were able to have really no break in their connections. For example, when we were younger, you left school and you left the problems of the day at the door there.
Right.
And the only way they continued was if someone called you on the actual phone. Today, our students don't have that opportunity, and they haven't for a long time. So we've embedded that programming to where we see it being appropriate and available to our kids. But it's an ongoing issue because it's so available to them. And I think the pandemic has really increased that because they rely on that for connection.
Right, and my experience has even been that age of kids adopting that technology has gone down and down and down. So even in the later elementary schools, kids are on TikTok and Snapchat and all this other stuff. So I appreciate the comments about it, and I appreciate that you have eyes on that because it's so critical even after we get to a post-pandemic world. One last question is, I didn't hear any talk about Milford measures. That's something, a phrase that's been used. I'm wondering, do we have any Milford measures that we use to gauge whether this programming is working for our students? I know it's a very individualized thing, whether it's working for an individual student, but as a general district, do we look at any statistics or modeling that talks about whether this is successful or not?
So that's to come, Mr. DeYoung. We actually, I don't think these folks know it yet, but there's a meeting the first week of January to talk about that on my books. But we anticipate a category on the Milford measures to involve SEL.
Okay.
And it's also connected to the answer to Ms. Wolf-Boynton in that there's something on the docket for this that has just kind of been simmering just because of recent events, but I believe that we'll fast track that coming up so that we would have something available. In fact, Dr. Fettigan and I talked about piloting something in March, April, so that we would have an example for the board at least later in the spring. So it will be, it's just in development.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Doyle.
Hi, thank you. I really appreciated the addition of ACEs. I've been familiar with them, so it's very interesting to see the overlap into the SEL curriculum. So one of the things I took away from the first presentation, the first video, was students often have conflicts when they don't have friends. And so that kind of relates back into my mind of the number of students who are in crisis right now that we don't know what's happening. And my question is more of what happens when a student is crisis to make sure the student stays safe and the rest of the community stays safe in the same sense. And very broad strokes are perfectly fine. I'm just interested in how we are going through making sure everyone, the student most importantly, is safe and everyone within the community. Thank you.
I can tell you from my experience in my building role that we have very defined processes and structures in place to ensure the safety and well-being of all of our members in our community. So the foundation of that is based on the relationships that we have with students. And so when a concern is brought forward, there are multidisciplinary teams in each building that respond. And in terms of broad strokes, it's really about taking all the measures necessary to ensure that we're meeting the whole child, all the needs that are presenting, and that we're really probing to find out what exactly is going on and making sure that we are developing response plans that really address all the needs that are presenting, and partnering with not only families but also our community partners that also would be supportive. And these are processes that have been in place for many years, and we continue to refine and reflect on them constantly. And we are a very collaborative team, so it's never on any one individual, that concept of safety. And it all comes from a relationship perspective. We want all of our students to be safe and successful, and you can't be actively learning if you're not available for learning. So it's everyone from our teachers to our counselors to our administrators to our social workers and psychologists in coordination with our police department contacts and all of our other partners, we work together to respond to when situations come up, but in a way that we're looking at all the supports that are necessary, not just one piece, making sure we see the whole picture.
We anticipated that this year would be a bit challenging in terms of students' mental health, and some of the work we did over the summer helped prepare us for that. For example, the work with our mental health staff around ACEs so that they could then train their staff on ACEs. And along those same lines, Mr. Brown created a counseling referral process, or he updated and revised the counseling referral process so that as we told teachers about, reminded them what ACEs were and how to look for them, we also said, and here's the counseling referral process if you see these signs happening, right, trying to prevent anything that gets to an actual crisis mode, but to treat the child and help the child before it gets to that place.
Great, thank you.
Any final questions from board members? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very timely, very worthwhile.
Thanks. Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gunn, I'd like to move forward with the athletic program annual financial report with Mr. Riccitelli, and I know our two athletic directors have waited patiently. Thank you.
Blessing is going to bring the report so we can get it on the screens here. Here we go. And as Dr. Kutaya said, with us tonight are our athletic directors Anthony Vitale and VJ Cerullo, and also Dr. Gillespie is as the supervisor of student development and wellness, oversees the athletic department. So we're all four of us are here to answer any questions that you have. But I'll be fairly quick. I mean, the presentation is, the board has seen it before for the most part, so we'll jump right into it. Let's see. I'm hitting the arrows.
Dr. Gillespie to the rescue.
I don't think it's connected.
Yeah, but I don't think it's. There we go. Yeah. There you go. Just in. All right, good. Great. Dr. Gillespie talked about Mr. Smith's technology skills, but he's light years ahead of me, so. Great. Okay. So at the athletic programs at both of our high schools, we have 24 sports that are sanctioned by the CIAC, the Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic Conference, and one sport, girls hockey, which is not technically overseen by CIAC. We go to great lengths to make sure that there's equity between the two high schools, both in finances and resources. And so this report just gives a general overview of the finances and the athletic programs in general. In addition to the 25 sports that we have in Milford Public Schools, there we go. There are other opportunities for students to participate in athletic type activities. A few of them are unified sports, the powder puff game, and the fencing club, just to name a very, very few. But I'll just touch on unified and powder puff really quickly. The unified sports program is a registered program of Special Olympics. We partner student athletes with and without intellectual disabilities for training and competition. obviously, COVID, there'll be, there were many interruptions to our athletic programs and all of our programs because of COVID. So throughout the report tonight, we'll make mention of those. But when in a non-COVID year, there would be approximately 65 to 75 students who participate in the Unified Sports Program. And there's competition in soccer, basketball, volleyball, softball, wiffle ball, and bowling. The Powder Puff is an annual event rather than a particular sport. That the Powder Puff game is our female athletes who participate in a flag football game the night prior to, or it's Tuesday night, I believe, prior to the Thanksgiving football game. It's always a great source of community pride between the two schools. And many girls participate, and this year Jonathan Law dominated both on Thanksgiving and the Powder Puff. But both games were really close, and as you heard from our student representatives, the Powder Puff game actually was in overtime. So that was good stuff. There was not a game in 2021 due to COVID. And then just on the next slide, the COVID interruption, so to speak. In the 1920 school year, as you know, COVID hit us in March of 2020, so we got the winter season in, but we did not get a spring season in. So the entire spring season was canceled in 2020. In 1920, football and wrestling were canceled. The other sports did have shortened, abbreviated, and somewhat modified seasons, but the student athletes were able to participate with strict protocols and spectator presentation, which was limited and extremely restricted. In 21-22, all sports resumed. We had a full fall sports season with some remaining COVID protocols, and at this point we are planning for a full schedule of winter sports, as you heard from the student reps, already underway in many of those sports. So tonight, the athletic finances, there's two funds that we use to fund the athletic programs. Number one is the general fund, and number two is the athletic activities accounts, and I'll just talk a little bit about each one of those. The general fund is the budget that you pass each January. When we get into the budget, we'll talk about the things that go into the athletic program, which are things like coaches' salaries, transportation to the athletic contests, the trainers, insurance, equipment and supplies, and uniforms. So those items are all funded through your budget through the general fund. The athletic activities account is what generally pays for game day operations. When we say game day operations, things like the officials, the referees, the umpires, the ticket takers, the announcers, the scorers, things like that, police officers, security, ambulance, those type of things. So things that are game day operations are supposed to be funded through the athletic activities accounts. And generally those are funded, number one, by the gate, by the gate receipts, the tickets that are sold to the athletic contests. But as I'm going to talk about a little bit later in the presentation, we're maxed out on what we collect from gate receipts, but each year the cost of those game day operations continues to rise. So the board has, in its wisdom, has seen fit to supplement the funds that we take in at the gate in order to pay for the expenses that we have for game day operations. So on the next slide, slide 11, these are the general fund expenditures, and I apologize when the alignment is off on these, but it just gives you the breakdown of what is spent out of the general fund in the 2021 school year. Both schools were just over 70,000, which is what your board budgeted. And then we supplemented those game day operations to the tune of 47,000 each for each school. The hockey programs, both for boys and girls, are a little bit different, and I'll explain those a little bit toward the end of the presentation. So total expenses in student athletics of $286,180. Then there's a breakdown for transportation, and that asterisk there means that that was a great savings. If you look in the budget, it's probably double that, but because we had abbreviated seasons, there was a lot, we weren't transporting students to the athletic contests, so there was a great savings in the 2021 year for athletic transportation. And then you have the amount that we spend for our coaches. So revenue in the athletic activities account on the next slide. In the 2021 year, we did get in the fall sports and the winter sports. So we did take in the $94,000, and we also received donations. I'm sorry, these are, hold on one second. Yes, I take that back. We did not get, this is for the 2021 year, and we did not get any gate receipts in that year. So the game day operations of $94,000 is what your board supplemented in order to pay for the game day operations. Because as I said, even though they were shortened or modified seasons, we still did have game day operations for most of the sports except for football or wrestling. We did not collect, there were no tournaments or special events. Hockey participation fees, we didn't collect those this year because of the shortened seasons and the modifications. And then there were a very small amount of donations or royalties. And I mention this every year. Yes, we do get royalties for the foreign and lawn names that are on sweatshirts in some of the stores that you may go into around town. We do get a small amount of money for royalties for using those names on athletic apparel. So total in the athletic activities accounts was $95,132. Then on the next slide, I'm not going to go through each one, but these numbers are all in your budget as actual expenses. And you can see how much we spent total for athletics in the 2021 year, and that was $1,182,703. So I already touched on ticket sales a little bit, but what we do is you're relying upon gate receipts to fund those expenses that continue to go up each year. But as you'll see on a slide that's coming up, the amount of money that we take in at the gate is pretty much maxed out. And ticket sales vary from year to year depending on weather, depending on how well a particular team is doing, things like that. So on slide number 16, slide 15 is in there, but it just shows that we took in nothing in the 2021 year. But slide 16, these are the gate receipts history. As you can see, from the 1819 and 1920 years, we're pretty much leveling out, and of course in 2021 there was nothing, but this is pretty much where we're going to be. I mean, there's not much more that we're going to be able to bring in gate receipts. But as I said before, the expenses continue to rise. So I anticipate that in future budgets, we will be asking you for additional funds in order to keep up with those rising costs that we're not able to take in at the gate. So slide 17, great. Student participating by sport. We just give you the breakdown of how many students. This is total across Milford Public Schools, so law and foreign are both included in each of the sports. So you can see how many of our students participate in the individual sports. And just a note at the bottom that in the 18-19 school year, there was not enough athletes or swimmers, boys swimmers, from both schools. So the CIAC allowed us to co-op, and we continue to have one team for Milford Public Schools for boys swimming, as well as boys and girls hockey, which I'll talk about in a second. On slide 18, this is the breakdown of the actual expenses by sport. So you can see, I won't go through them, but you can see what those are. There is a category there that's all sports, and so somebody always asks that, so I'll answer the question now. All sports is those things, those items that are common amongst all sports, and I use the example of trainers' tape or ace bandages or things like that, supplies that are across all sports, and that's how much we spent on those types of things. Then on slide 19 is just the cost per student of each sport. As you can see, the three biggest ones are boys hockey, girls hockey, and golf. And that's because the expenses are relatively high, but they're divided by a small amount of athletes because there are not a lot of student athletes on those teams. So you can see which, how much each sport costs per student. On slide 20, boys hockey is a little bit different because there's not enough students at either foreign or law to have individual teams. CIAC allows for co-op teams, just like they did with swimming. So hockey has been a co-op team for many years now. We host the co-op, and Platt Tech is also in our co-op. And so the hockey program is run or overseen by BJ Cerullo at the law athletic director. And on the next slide, just the Platt Tech contributes $600 per player, and your board contributes quite a bit of money toward the boys hockey program. And each year, if we go to the next slide, we do have, because hockey is so expensive and hockey players are used to paying a lot of those expenses, we do have a small participation fee. You can see that I keep this running because in the 2012-2013 year, boys hockey players were paying $850 to participate, and the board at that time made a decision to increase the amount of board support for the hockey program, which, as you can see, greatly lowered the amount that the student athletes have to pay. And it ranges now between $200 and $300 per athlete. And of course, as I said, last year we didn't charge a participation fee. Now, girls hockey, this has been a topic in your board updates. For many years, or for a number of years, the girls in Milford Public Schools participated in a co-op program that was hosted by Notre Dame of Fairfield. Last year, Notre Dame came to us and said that they were no longer in a position to host that co-op, and so we made the recommendation, and your board supported us in that in order to give the girls the opportunity to play hockey that were in Milford Public Schools, we decided to host the co-op last year. And we had athletes from Foreign Law, Notre Dame of Fairfield, Weston, and Pomperaug. That was the 2021 school year. Now in 2021-22, there's not enough participation for us. The athletic directors did a tremendous amount of work in trying to bring girls into the program, but there just wasn't the response this year. And so it was, in order to best give our girls the opportunity to participate for years to come, the decision was made to join the Hamden Hockey Co-op. So the girls from Foreign Law are on the girls this year, are on the Hamden Hockey Co-op, and they are participating with students on that co-op from Hamden, New Haven, East Haven, Brantford, and Wallingford. And so far, I think that we're hearing that pretty good. We're doing pretty well. And all of the parents have been supportive of that move, because it does allow our girls sustainability for the future of a strong hockey program. As you can on slide 24, the number of girls. I will note that this year there are only 5 girls who are from Foreign Law who are on the Hamden Co-op. So that was part of the reason why the athletic directors identified that we just wouldn't be able to sustain a team this year, and went out and looked for a strong hockey program. And Hamden was gracious enough to allow our girls to participate in their co-op. So with that, I know that was a quick overview of the entire program, but any of us are here to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Riccitelli. Do we have questions from board members? Ms. Petrosky?
Mr. Riccitelli, on slide 23, the last bullet point says MPS to pay player participation fee and for transportation to Hamden.
Yes.
Does that include practices or just games?
Practices also.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
On that same bullet, Mr. Riccitelli, can you explain Milford Public Schools to pay player participation fee? What does that refer to?
Sure. When the girls were on the Notre Dame program, we paid what Notre Dame was charging their girls, which was $1,300. I'm sorry, $1,500 per student athlete. The board, not we, the board paid for $1,300 of that, and then the girls' families paid $200. This year, Hamden's participation fee is $1,250. So that's what the board's contribution to the girls. So the girls will have no participation fee this year, and the board will supplement with $1,250. And the reason that we didn't continue the $200 for the girls is because we felt that it's a transition year. In addition, the going to Hamden every day as opposed to being right here at the Milford Ice Pavilion, we just thought that this would be a good year not to charge a participation fee, in light of the fact that we'll also be paying less than what we paid to the Notre Dame co-op, and much, much less than what we spent last year on hosting the co-op.
Do you anticipate reinstituting the family portion in the future?
Potentially, yes.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Just for the record, I think it's fair that the family portion of the fees for girls and boys be similar. Mr. DeYoung?
Thank you. Thanks for the report, Mr. Riccitelli. I don't think we've had an opportunity to say thank you to the athletic directors who You know, sports is such a huge part of the community of going to school, and the fact that you guys did all that you did to make sure the kids were back on the fields and in the gyms is a real testament to the importance of sports and also the hard work that you guys put in. So thank you for that. I have a question about, we as a board, we have supported significant investments in upgrading some fields, specifically softball fields and football fields and things like that over the years. The city has also invested quite a bit of money in improving some of the fields, specifically over at Foreign. Is there any revenue potential from those fields, or is that strictly just a benefit to our student athletes?
No, there are benefits. We do rent out the fields, but by state law, that money goes to the city.
Okay.
It doesn't come back to the board. It goes to the city, and there's not a lot when our own community youth sports use the facilities, we do charge them for things like custodial fees. If they have to if they're going to use the clock and we need to use a timer, we will charge them for the fees, but we waive the rental fee because they're a community, a recognized community program. So there is some rental capacity, not a lot, after our high schools use them, and again, the money goes right to the city.
Okay, great.
And that's in a revenue item in the city's budget.
You have roughly, I mean, it's roughly an idea what that amount is?
It's usually under $10,000 a
Okay,
year.
so it's not terribly significant. Okay.
No.
And then I just had one other question. It's great that we've been able to invite spectators back in to some of these events. I think that's critical too. Anybody that's watched any sports on TV with no fans in the stands, it's painfully slow to watch. Who is setting those guidelines for whether or not spectators can come back in, whether or not student athletes have to wear masks, etc.? Is that our local health department? Is that the CIAC?
Yeah, well, there's been lots of conversations about this. Dr. Gillespie can probably answer, but we take executive orders, number one, state health department, number two, down to CIAC, down to our local health department. So we take all of that guidance, and we confer. I mean, when we were in the heat of it, we were conferring once or twice a week.
Yeah.
So.
We have a district group that meets pretty much bi-weekly at this point. It consists of our building leadership, myself, our athletic directors, and community partners with the health department, as well as a nursing representative from our schools. Sometimes our trainers and coaches join us as well. And what we do is collaboratively propose, we propose our guidelines to the health department, and they give us the approval moving from there. But it is governed, as Mr. Riccitelli said, by the recommendations from the CIAC as well as the Connecticut Department of Health. So at this point, our winter sports plan is directly aligned with those recommendations.
And I'm sorry, I don't know what the current executive order is on indoor sports specifically. What is that? Do you know?
There are no restrictions.
That's not an executive order. It comes from the recommendation from DPH to CIAC. We take the CIAC plan that they publish for each seasonal sport. Then we develop a protocol, and it gets approved through our local health department. So to say that there's an executive order would be incorrect in phraseology.
Okay.
But it does come from the state.
Okay. So is that published somewhere for people who
on the CIAC website?
On CIAC website. Thank you.
They have every season listed on that website from going back to COVID.
That's great. Okay, thank you both.
I can also include it and send it to you.
It's not necessary. Thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Doyle?
Hi, thank you. I will say it was great to be at the the football game on Thanksgiving with the huge crowds, and nice to be there to see everything. So that was one sport where they do collect a gate. What other sports are there gates collected?
The athletic directors can correct me if I'm wrong, but in the fall season, it's the football and those sports that are inside as well as soccer that are outside, right? Yeah, volleyball, swimming. In the winter sports, it's hockey, boys and girls basketball, boys swimming, everything that all of the winter sports. And the spring sports is only lacrosse, right? Yeah, just lacrosse.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions from board members? All right, seeing none, thank you very much for
Thank you.
We'd like to move on to the Human Resources Report by Ms. Kapazna.
Thank you. So for my report this month, you have the job postings, new hires, retirements, resignations, and stipend appointments. And this month, you'll notice that we are presenting our winter sports coaching stipends for the 2 high schools. Also, I just wanted to point out just a couple of facts that we are up to 7 retirements so far this year. It's a little early, but we do have something in the teacher's contract that if a teacher informs us by December 15th of their intended retirement, they get an additional $500. So we did get a couple over the past few days. We are up to hiring 72 new teachers for the school year, and we currently have, I believe it's 5 open teaching positions. But I did want to mention that these positions are not positions that we've been searching for all summer. They're all new positions due to a couple of mid-year retirements and a couple of resignations that we've experienced. So that's the good news, and we're doing well. I think we're putting out another offer to a teacher tomorrow. And we're still, of course, searching for substitutes, both per diem and building subs. We have the run-of-the-mill things that happen every year, which are people having babies and people having surgeries, and a lot of our building subs are taking those roles, which are leaving us short in the per diem, day-to-day absences. So we're still struggling there, but we're doing our best. That's it for me.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Kapazna? Mr. DeYoung?
Thank you. Just one quick question. It says we're looking for remote learning elementary school teachers until filled.
Yes.
How many are we looking for, and how many openings are there?
So actually, there are no openings there. We did leave it up in case our numbers rise and our model needs to change. We've kind of adjusted things as we've been going along. So that's kind of still up there just in case.
Understood. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions from board members on the Human Resources Report? Thank you, Ms. Kapazna.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to move to the disbursement report. Mr. Riccitelli.
Thank you, Dr. Kataya. Members of the board, in your package is a listing of all of the disbursements for the district for the month of November over the amount of $1,500. Those items that are COVID related are highlighted in yellow, and I am happy to answer any questions that you have on the report.
Were there any questions for Mr. Riccitelli?
Thank you.
Thank you, board members. If we could move to the agenda item entitled Board of Education Schedule Meetings 22, we will need your approval this evening. Bring your attention to the document in your board packet that lists each date. Please note, of interest, there are 2 board meetings per month with the exception of June, July, August, and December. There is, with the exception of 1 meeting, these are held on Monday nights. 1 meeting in September in recognition of Rosh Hashanah will be held on Tuesday. That is that of September 27th. It is here for your approval.
Thank you, Dr. Kutaya. Just a reminder for the board, this list must be submitted to the Secretary of State's office annually. At this time of year, we're required to do so, and these become our regular meeting dates. Any meeting that's held outside of these dates during the year would be a special meeting. Do you have a motion, Ms. Petrosky?
Yes, I do. I make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves the 2022 Board of Education schedule of meetings as presented.
Is there a second?
I second.
Mr. Fowler has seconded. Do we have any discussion amongst board members? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, board members. If I could move you to the 22-23 academic calendar. This is a first read. We'll ask for your approval next time we meet. If I could go over some general specifics of the calendar. We will start the last Wednesday of August, the 31st that is. Preceding that will be 2 adult days, 2 professional learning days, and some work time for teachers in classrooms. In the month of September, we observe Labor Day and a Jewish holiday on September 26th, Rosh Hashanah. There is an early release day in September, as there is each month following for professional learning. You'll note that on October 5th, we recognize Yom Kippur. In November, we will have a professional learning day on Election Day. November is a little different than other calendars. We added it on an early dismissal day for professional learning. We just need to infuse more professional learning with more curriculum that we're rewriting, a focus on high quality instruction, vision of the learner. Many of the pieces that we'll be covering in Milford Measures, the mastery-based diploma assessment work that Dr. Fedigan and her team are working on. So there is a lot happening in the area of teaching and learning that we just need more time with teachers. In December, you'll see our holiday break starting on the 23rd, returning students and staff on January 3rd. MLK is recognized on the 16th. In February, we have a holiday weekend wrapped around President's Day, the 17th through the 20th. We have a professional learning day on March 8th. In April, we recognize Good Friday on the 7th and then take spring break thereafter. If you recall, a couple years ago, we administered a survey to parents, and it was very strongly supported that spring break occur after the Good Friday holiday instead of inclusive of. So the last couple of years, we've been doing that in response to our parents' needs. You will see a Memorial Day in May of 23, and fingers crossed, the last day of school is the 13th. We will need to make a correction on this document that's before you. If I could take your attention to the last paragraph on the document. The sentence that reads, should more days be needed, they will be deducted from April 23 vacation, beginning with April 14th and backing up to April 10th. Be happy to take any questions the board may have.
Questions from board members on the academic calendar? Mr. DeYoung?
Thank you. So not really a question, more of a comment, and I probably bring it up every year, but I'm disappointed that we don't have a February break for our students. You know, it's a long winter to be in school with minimal break. I see that we have, you know, the typical 2 days off around a long weekend, around President's Day weekend. But I hope the board will consider extending that to be a full week at the end of February.
Can I add some information to that, board? So I appreciate you stating your opinion on that, Mr. DeYoung, and I'm going to look at it from an academic perspective. I'd rather have days in February than in June. The stamina of staff and students alike is not the same, and I'd rather front load that opportunity for students and have their time and attention, mind, body, and soul, and focused in February. Adding days to June, it's hotter in our non-air conditioned buildings. You don't know what's going to happen with snow days. That's a luck of the draw, depending on the winter season. We also, in preparation for the calendar, there's always this part where this may come up, so we prepared. Interestingly enough, the school district surveyed parents twice in the last 10 years on calendar. And in 2013-14, administration that preceded me administered a survey where nearly 3,000 parents responded and almost 700 staff members responded. And when asked about the 4-day weekend versus the week, at that time 45% of parents responded they wanted a 4-day weekend, and almost 20% of parents wanted the week off. And staff responded, almost 57% wanted to keep a 4-day weekend, and 33% wanted to keep the week off. Interestingly enough, 26% of parents just wanted to eliminate the long weekend altogether. So, the February break was removed in the 2010-2011 school year due to, I think, 13 snow days that year. And again, previous administration put it back in, administered the survey, and then took it back out based on parent responses. When I first arrived in the district, we administered a calendar survey in 2018, and this was a question on the survey as well. At that time, only 3 short years ago, 26%, almost 27% of parents wanted to go back to a full week of February break. 60% of parents wanted to keep a 4-day weekend. And when asking staff, 70% of staff wanted to keep 4-day weekend, and 25% of staff wanted to go to a full week off. So back in 2013-14 as well as 2018, it's, I think, safe to say that an overwhelming majority of parents and staff want to keep a 4-day week as a winter break in February. As superintendent of schools, I recommend, as represented in this calendar, that we hold on to valuable time in February for teaching and learning, rather than adding it to June. There is, as I said, the uncertainty of weather-related cancellations that could put us well into the long into June. And I have been a leader. You want to know how many snow days we've had, and we also did one more piece. Sorry, Ms. Glennon. We also did some research on New Haven County school districts and some local area going down the coastline a little bit. In our research of about 16 school districts that we looked up manually online, only 2 school districts have full weeks off, and those school districts are Westport and Greenwich. But school districts that are in New Haven County, school districts that are most like us, neighboring towns, have a 4-day weekend.
I believe also when we, at the very brief attempt at a regional calendar the state made, the 4-day weekend was the option for February. Mr. DeYoung.
Just a quick follow-up on that. Can you talk about so we start very early in end of August, September. So what's the difference between, academic time in that time period versus later in June?
Well, I wouldn't qualify it as very early. It's a 4-day early, and I think after having 2 months off and you are renewed, refreshed, you come back invigorated, and that environment is much different than being in school for 10 months and running out of steam. And now I've added 10 days to June. So I think that's a big difference.
Other questions or comments from board members? Ms. Doyle?
Hi, thank you for that information. Can you, just talking about February still, what's the difference of having the early dismissal on the 15th versus what would be the 22nd? What's like the rationale for that?
I don't understand the question, I'm sorry.
In some ways, the anticipation of Friday coming up, how does the early dismissal affect the school day is more of that? Would it be more disruptive as the 15th or the 22nd?
Oh, you're saying would it be better as the 15th?
Yes.
I don't know that there's a big difference. I could take it back to the teaching and learning department and see if there's a preference. So if there's a change, I'm happy to bring it back to the next one, but thank you for that pondering question.
Any other questions from board members? Okay, seeing none, so, the academic calendar will be back on the agenda in January for adoption.
That completes the superintendent's report, Ms. Glennon.
Thank you, Dr. Kutaya. We have only two items, items 1 and 2 on the consent agenda. Ms. Petrosky, do you have a motion?
Yes, I do. I would like to make a motion. Excuse me one moment. I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn to executive session for superintendent's, I'm sorry. I'd like to make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves the consent agenda items, consideration of minutes for the November 8th, 2021 business meeting and the November 22nd, 2021 special meeting.
Organizational meeting. Item 3 was removed, items 1 and 2. Can you restate the motion?
No, I said special meeting. Excuse me, let me try that again. I'd like to make a motion that the Milford Board of Education approves the consent agenda items, consideration of minutes for the November 8th, 2021 business meeting and the November 22nd, 2021 organizational meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Mr. Fowler has seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Do we have any board members who'd like to make board comment this evening? Okay, seeing none, do you have a motion for executive session, Ms. Petrosky?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn to executive session for the superintendent's mid-year update. Dr. Kutaya is invited into the session.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We will be in recess to executive session at 9:27. And board members, we will have to come back here to adjourn the meeting when we're done. Thank you. Okay, we are reconvening to public session at 10:48 p.m. Ms. Petrosky, do you have a motion to adjourn, please?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
Seconded by Mr. Fowler. Are there any objections to adjourning? Seeing none, we are adjourned at 10:48. Thank you.